I can almost feel it. I can almost taste it. Spring is coming. The Marlins have announced their non-roster invitees. There's tons to get into because there's tons of names on there. Many of them are going to be actually pushing for jobs. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins, your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. It's your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel as well. Hit subscribe over there too. And I'm delighted to welcome back in the house to carry on this conversation. Sean, the UK GOAT Barrett is back. How are we doing?
Doing well, Pete. We're back to 5 a week. That means probably going to be on here a little bit more. So hopefully,
you know it, baby.
Hopefully that's agreeable to everyone because I'm rather fond of doing this with you, mate.
I can speak for all of Marlins Twitter and YouTube comments. They are firmly agreeable. What else is agreeable is FanDuel's offers right now. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and get $200 in bonus bets. If your first bet of $5 or more wins, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Sean, I can taste spring. Like, we're on a countdown now to like pitchers and catchers reporting. For some reason, the Marlins pitchers and catchers seemingly reporting later than like everyone else. I don't know why. It's probably administrative or linked to this Caribbean series or whatever's going on. I don't know, but I'm surprised the Marlins are reporting like a day or two late. But nevertheless, it feels really close now. Starting to get excited now of baseball. Like, you know, we can feel it. We can touch it. We'll start actually see players doing things. We can talk about the now rather than what happened last year and all sorts of potential trade situations. So this should be fun. Sean, how do you find this part of the year personally? Like, when does the anticipation like really fully like kick in for you?
Well, spring is it's my favorite time of the year, and that's baseball related. The first time it feels real is it's funny because when the popular soft drink company push out their truck advert, it starts to feel like Christmas. Doesn't feel like spring to me until you've got videos of pitchers and catchers through a chain link fence. That's when you know baseball's back.
Like, that is it. That tells you that, you know, summer is really close when you've got a chain link fence going on with Devin Smeltzer throwing a slider. That's when we know. So I'm excited for that. The Marlins have announced, I say they've announced, but the other thing around spring is we've got first view of the spring training caps as well, or lids, or whatever you want to call them. So the Marlins caps are looking nice, by the way. They're looking nice. They've gone like heavy onto the, that's that kind of blue color, where last year I think it was like the black, all black, but then with like the logo. But they've changed the look of them. Have you seen those, Sean, or not?
They're the ones with the pinstripes.
No, they're the BP ones. So they've also got these BP caps. Well, I mean, I jokingly put out there, you know, just saying like that's the biggest move, like on-field move the Marlins have made is announcing these BP caps. But they've got these spring ones as well. So they're official caps for spring games. They've got two, and they're like that blue color, like the spring training color jerseys they've been using. It's that color rather than black. So they look pretty nice too. So spring is coming. I mean, I don't actually know if those spring jerseys then, if they're still in rotation because they've adjusted their other main ones. So that's another unknown of this phase. Anyway, moving on, we have a view of who will be attending or who will be a non-roster invitee. So all the 40-man, as we know, will be there in camp. and then it's augmented or supplemented with additional guys that are in the organization already but don't sit on the 40-man. And we had an announcement from the Marlins of who those players will be. And I think there's definitely some very interesting names, and some of which I think could be hunting for a job either for opening day. Not even that. Some may be hunting for jobs as well, during the season. They're kind of putting their best foot forward now. So if there's a need, they're the next guy up effectively. So it looks like we've got, what have we got? 14 guys? Is that the right number? I don't know. Let's go with 14. Either way, there's 4 catchers on there, so they're catcher heavy, Sean. Which isn't a surprise considering, that was the suggested route, it seems, from Peter Bennings. We're going to go heavy on catcher. We're just going to play the numbers game. And then we've decided, actually, no, Nick Fortes and Christian Bethancourt look like the right two. Looks like those are going to be, the starting catchers. But, maybe for Will Banfield, Paul McIntosh, the guys that have been in the organization for some time, they'll be jostling for position, I'd say, in spring, trying to, put themselves up. I would say is, the backup of the backup, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it is a case of you've got 2 catchers. You'll have 2 catchers on the roster. It's an incredibly tough job physically. You get dinged up, you get battered, quite literally. So these young guys are the next men up. So they're absolutely, if not playing for a role, waiting for a role.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the 2 of them, I mean, there's 4 there, but I think you'd call them 2 the main 2, the more realistic 2. They know they're fighting against each other to be that next man up. So that's what spring's all about, isn't it? It's these battles. It's about having players having competition. If you know for sure you've got the role, then you're not on your P's and Q's. You're not going 110%. You're not taking that extra rep. When you know you've got a guy breathing down your neck or racing with you around every single turn, it is a case you've got to be ready to beat him out, essentially.
Yeah. Where do you see the biggest kind of spring battles? Where are we going to be focused on as we get into spring? What position groups? And it may not be the 26-man. It may not be about that. To your point, the backup of the backup catcher situation is going to be a battle. These 4 guys that are in camp, they're all looking to put their best foot forward. So when needed, they're the guy that gets the call. So, the catcher spot is an obvious one. And then you think about how heavily weight, when you look at the actual non-roster invitee list, only a couple of outfielders. I thought that was interesting. You've only got Griffin Conine, Jonathan Davis on there as well. So 2 players in quite different spots in many ways. And then you've got a guy called Marty Costes, of which the pronunciation is TBC on that one. Nevertheless, from an outfield perspective, though, what's to play for from the outfield spots, if anything, at this point?
Well, one thing you've got to factor in is how many outfielders there are on the actual roster. So that's probably why there aren't so many non-roster guys. But yeah, it's obviously Conine and Davis to bring 2 completely different things, don't they? Conine gives you all that power and 40% K rates, probably 50% K rates at the major league level. And Davis gives you other things. Defensively, he's probably the better defender. So yeah, those 2 they're probably fighting for next man up as well, because I don't see theoretically without any injury or anything like that, it would take some real poor performance from the guys on the actual roster. Maybe Peyton Burdick is probably the number 1 most likely candidate for replacement if he does struggle. For me, the infield is interesting. You've obviously got Mancini and Johnston, and to a lesser degree Berry, all fighting for that sort of we know the Marlins have one more roster spot in the sense of a first base DH hole. I think, or I'd hope they'd fill that at some point and not have to use one of those 3 guys and then Mancini maybe. But realistically, I'd like all 3 of them to be fighting an established guy and be the next man up. So there's some really interesting battles. And again, that's spring, isn't it? You want these guys knowing that they're either fighting for a spot or fighting to be that next man up, because injuries happen in baseball all the time.
When I think of spring battles, the one that always sticks in my mind is Isan Diaz and Jazz Chisholm Jr. Like Isan was like inked in. I remember Glenn Geffner was on the broadcast talking about it, saying it's Isan's time. He's shown everything. There's nothing more for Isan to show. Like, this is like maybe game 5. And next thing is, like, Isan had probably one of the worst spring trainings like ever in the history of spring. And Jazz just came and took the job. And that was effectively the end of Isan Diaz's career, to be honest with you. It's pretty crazy, but it's kind of the way it went. Like, it's funny how players emerge, and like that can happen. And I would say, and I tweeted this out, like in terms of an emerging player, one that I think is the most interesting from the offensive standpoint in particular is Tristan Gray. He's the name and there's the profile, I think, that really does stand out. So let's talk about him shortly. But before we do that, let's talk about our good friends. If I can load this up, if this laptop works, we could talk about our good friends over at FanDuel, of course. Guys, it's getting near the Super Bowl, so it's time to get in on the action. So happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks and placing some super bets and watching that halftime show with Usher, baby. Yes, sir. Usher. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl itself, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a TD, how many points are scored, who's going to win the coin toss, what color's the Gatorade, how many Taylor Swift images appear on the broadcast. I don't know. There's going to be everything there for you. Nevertheless, new customers join today and you get $200 in bonus bets. Yes, you heard that correct. $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt, and UK coach Sean Barrett. We are talking non-roster invitees. Sean, the guy who stands out for me, Tristan Gray. I think this profile has a ton of upside. I think he's going to be given an opportunity subject to other moves. Where's your head at on Tristan Gray at this point?
Yeah, he's come from Tampa, so obviously that's
of course
that's a common story of the off season. Yeah, interesting. There's some pop there.
There is.
There's also K rate, but that kind of comes part and parcel. He's no longer a young prospect at the age of 27.
It's time.
But again, it is a case of comes into spring and starts hitting bombs left, right, and centre. All of a sudden, he really could. There are spots in this lineup, in this roster, that are able to be beat out. So yeah, absolutely. The Marlins. We spoke before a couple of episodes ago about the idea that the Marlins are kind of the perfect team for some of these guys, where they're like, my opportunity to play baseball is higher there than maybe other places. The Marlins have for decades put quad A guys out onto the major league lineup. So yeah, the opportunity is of course there, and maybe one of these unheralded, unknown guys comes out of nowhere and steals it away.
Let me ask. So, to your point, like Tristan Gray, he's not a young prospect by any stretch. Neither is Troy Johnston. I mean, the amount of tweets, articles, conversations, podcast episodes about Troy Johnston has been mind-blowing for a guy that they didn't even protect in the Rule 5 and no one even bothered taking a flyer on. That's Troy Johnston, by the way. But Tristan Gray, ton of bombs, old by prospect standards as well. Like I'm looking at Tristan Gray's profile. I'm thinking, I prefer this profile over Troy Johnston quite significantly, to be honest with you. I can see him making an impact in spring. Defensively, though, Sean, what are we seeing from Gray? Like, I think that, that is a question mark, but I guess, they got a DH spot that's open. But, where could Gray realistically play defensively if indeed he was going to, be added to the 26-man roster?
Well, funny enough, he has played pretty much all over the place. I mean, he got significant reps at shortstop last year.
There we go.
That's something. God knows what that probably looked like. Who knows? But that's what spring's all about, isn't it? Like we're degenerates, and we'll probably watch far more innings of spring training than is healthy. So we'll get an opportunity to see it for sure. But yeah, with Johnston, obviously you get a completely different package. There's some pop and some speed there, bizarrely. But he's more contact guy. He'll take a walk. So they're sort of a yin and yang. With these high power, high strikeout guys, they're kind of feast and famine. Like he could have an absolutely massive spring and then fall apart in April, or vice versa. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Whereas with Johnston, you get more of like a flat line. The ceiling might not be as high, but the floor is definitely higher as well. So that's what spring's all about, isn't it? It's about taking these guys with two completely different polar approaches to playing the game and seeing which one works best, which one fits best. But yeah, those two could. Poor Johnston again could be in a battle that he ends up losing, especially if the Marlins do actually go ahead and sign a free agent.
I think that's, to be honest with you, I think Troy Johnston not only has got to deal with Trey Mancini, and I think he's in a battle with Trey Mancini. Well, I don't think he is. He is in a battle with Trey Mancini. Trey Mancini wants to make this roster, by the way. Like that'll be his mindset. But also, to your point, I think the Marlins are still active in terms of adding players. And so Troy Johnston may look at it and go, okay, Josh Bell's there. They add someone else. Trey Mancini's sitting there waiting to go as well. He's got there's a couple of tiers down until Troy gets a chance. But we'll see. It feels like I'm kind of bashing Troy. Like I'm not a believer, by the way. You for those that listen into this episode, this pod, all the time, I'm not a Troy Johnston believer. And the reason I'm not a Troy Johnston believer is I've never seen him play. So let me just call that out. Secondly, the Marlins, by their actions, are telling me they don't really believe in him either. So, if they don't believe in him and I've never seen him, I'm not invested. But in spring, I'm going to see him. I'm going to make my assessment without using any analytical resource. I'm just going to use my eyes. And I'm going to tell you what I think about Troy Johnston. So I'm interested to see what he looks like. Tristan Gray, for me, though, is like the true wild card here for spring in terms of non-roster guys, because the upside is dreamy. The position is very interesting for the Marlins. Clearly, the Rays, for the last few years, they've had a bit of a bottleneck at shortstop. Less so at the moment, but we won't really get into that topic area right now. But, has Tristan Gray just been blocked for this amount of time? And actually, is this just like an untapped resource that like ready to rock and roll? That's the dreamy thing. And it's like, if they add him to the roster, then great. League minimum. So could the Marlins actually solve their shortstop problem with Tristan Gray? This power potential is so dreamy, whether it translates. And going back to Isan Diaz, like I'm pretty sure Isan had a really similar profile to this in his AAA numbers. Sean, who else is kind of popping out to you? There's obviously like a few names that really stand out. Jacob Berry being one of them. Pat Monteverde is another name that like we heard a lot about from a pitcher perspective. Elvis Alvarado, I think, is another name that looks intriguing. He throws like high gas. For me, has a decent shot of making the opening day roster too. But who are you looking at? Who's like, are you going to be more closely following?
So the first name, quite literally, that popped off the page for me, which is strange because it's really not that exciting. Former Ray, Matt Andriese. When I first saw his name, I first thought he's had a fairly decent career. Why is he a non-roster invitee? And then I realized it's been years since he's actually pitched, so he's probably gone through some health issues. But But when he pitched more or less to just above Major League average, which again doesn't sound very exciting. But he's a guy that formerly started for the Rays, then became a bit more of a long man / multi-inning guy. For me, with Sandy gone, the Marlins are going to be in need of quality league average innings to fill the holes here and there.
Yeah.
Maybe stretch him out and see what he's got, see if he could actually be a quasi fifth starter, long man. I think that Matt Andriese has got himself a very good opportunity to have definitely the best year of recent years because he's hopefully finally healthy. But also he's a quality pitcher, a guy that strikes out free for every walk that he gives up. He's just a solid pitcher. Nothing exciting, nothing to write home about. But I really like those guys just on that fringe, just on that edge, that can just deliver what is expected of them, what is required of them. Because not everyone's a star player, but sometimes you just need that guy, that dogged determination to come in and just do a job. And that's what he's done for his whole career. And again, obviously, a former Ray. I mean, at this point, we're going to have more Rays on our team than the Rays actually do. So
exactly, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, we know what will happen with these dudes. Andriese is in this bucket. Devin Smeltzer's in this bucket. We absolutely know what's going to happen. It's going to be when required up, DFA limbo, when you back required again. Like Andriese, maybe Andriese can form more of a consistent role, but as soon as they're not required anymore, DFA, next guy in. It's just going to be the cycle. It's what it's what we saw last year. Who knows? To your point, like the profile does look interesting. Missed a couple of seasons, hasn't pitched a ton. Who knows? Is there a fifth starter spot available? Who knows? I guess, the interesting part of spring for me, like more generally, like if I think about the one thing in spring, is AJ Puk actually going to be stretched out as a starter? Like, is that hyperbole? Have the Marlins made that up to benefit them somehow in some other trade discussions? Like, are they legitimately going to be asking AJ Puk to be stretched out and go as a starter? For me, that's the one thing in spring that I am most intrigued about. Sean, what about AJ Puk for you?
For me, that's actually, as soon as you said, is that just discussion for trade purposes? That makes me really interested because, yes, when you're trying to trade Eddie or Trevor, as we spoke about yesterday, to get your shortstop of the future, maybe that trade's no longer on and that trade idea is no longer on. All of a sudden, you're looking to trade Scott. And all of a sudden, Puk's no longer getting stretched out and he's fighting for a closer role.
I got a feel for me, AJ Puk will not be starting any games for the Marlins. When I heard it, it didn't make a ton of sense. I feel like it as it's gone on, it's made less and less sense. And I hope we don't see it, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see it. I don't know, but yeah, that's my one thing to watch in spring is, what's AJ Puk's body of work look like, and does that normalize quickly down to a relief inning here and there for sure. We're going to call it a day there. There's probably more that we can get into, and actually more that we will get into. Clearly, this is just an announcement of who's going to be in camp. As we get more closer to the action, and when the action kicks off, we'll really be deep diving into these guys, the roles they're shooting for, and equally who's performing and who isn't. So we're going to keep a close watch on that. But for me, it's an interesting cluster of guys. We haven't mentioned Jacob Berry at all. He remains still the number 4 Marlins prospect in the system. For me, this feels like a big spring for Jacob Berry, considering the age and the draft pick and how things have gone. The expectation is that Jacob Berry, he's not on the roster at this point. He's not on the 40-man. So it isn't now. Doesn't have to be now. But I feel like Jacob Berry, he'll be feeling the pressure and he'll want to put on a show this spring to let the Marlins know and the fans know I'm here and I'm still a stud. Thanks to the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett, for joining me, of course. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. I'll be back in the coming days, and I have a surprise guest for you to be determined, but part of the Marlins organization, but not in spring or on the 40-man. We'll announce more very, very soon. I'll see you then.